Hey folks, I'm Joe, and you know the junk motor is just not what it appears to be. So I've got a lot of measurements to do, and I thought today on Big Fast Customs, I'll show you the tools I use and how I measure everything so we know what we've got and we can start getting this thing back together. So let's get started. Alright folks, so we're back in my garage with the junk motor. It's a lot messier here, but at least the lighting's better. So I have to do a lot of measurements on this motor. You guys that watched the last video saw that I bought 60 over piston rings because the pistons were marked 60 over and those rings don't fit. They're actually too big. So I've got to figure out what size cylinders I have, if the pistons I have are good enough, and then order some piston rings based on what I find. I was going to do all of that off camera, but I figured, you know, I have the tools, and especially when it comes to measuring stuff, it can get kind of intimidating. So the tools really aren't that expensive anymore, and they're not as difficult to use as you might think. So I'm hoping I can show you guys what I do to measure this stuff out, and then if you've got to do it for your motor, then you know, it won't seem so scary and you'll give it a try. That being said, I will remind you guys, whenever I say a spec or a tolerance or anything like that, do your own research. Don't just take what I say as the ultimate answer. Really don't take what I say as the ultimate answer. But I've been all over the internet looking at some of these specs and tolerances and stuff, and there's always an argument. One guy's built race engines for 50 years and he knows the right answer, and this guy goes strictly by the spec, and you know, there's all kinds of stuff. Look at your spec books, look on the internet, make your own decision of what you feel is right for your motor and build based off of that, okay? I'll remind you guys, I have to do all of this because the last mechanic that worked on this marked these pistons as 60 over, and he was a liar. So if I had done the measurements myself and figured out my own stuff, I wouldn't have bought an extra set of piston rings. So also I want to say the overall goal for this motor, just as a reminder, I call it the junk motor for a reason. I am putting this together out of used, almost 100-year-old auto parts. I don't plan to do any machining beyond the stuff I can do here in the garage with simple tools. So tolerances and specs and things like that, I'm going to be a little loose on some of them. I'll accept a little bit over specification. I'm not trying to build junk. If I measure anything and it comes out just really out of whack, then either we'll take it out for machining or we'll set the project aside. But so far everything looks okay. The plan is to build a solid motor. We're not going to build junk, but we're going to build a solid motor that'll run good. It just might not be exactly in spec, so it'll be fine. We're gonna deal with what we've got, and like I said, the motor looks good. So far, everything that I've gone over, I think we're in good shape, so we'll be fine with that. So that said, let's get into some of these tools. The last time you saw this, it still had the head studs in it. I've removed all the head studs. And I hate removing head studs because you usually break at least one, but I was incredibly lucky. I had a lot of trouble with this stud here, but I heated it up with the torch, PB blaster, heat with the torch, PB blaster, tapped on it a bit with a hammer, lightly. This bolt hole is kind of suspended under there, so you could easily break the block, so don't hit it too hard. But after all of that, I was able to get it to come loose, and none of the studs broke. So I'm very, very happy with that. Most people, when they pull the studs, they take two of the nuts that hold the head on, put them on the stud, tighten them down together, and then use that with their wrench to take the stud out. Works perfectly fine. It's free. You don't need any special tools. What I like to use is this stud extractor. I didn't buy it specifically for any of this. I've had this for years. I actually bought it for a Ford Falcon project I was working on. It's basically like if you imagine, it's kind of like a drill chuck. You put it on the stud, you tighten it on there, and it's got teeth in there that grab onto the stud, and then you can pull the stud out that way. And I like using this. I feel like it doesn't grab at the threads like the two nuts do. It grabs down on the shank area of the stud, which I think is better. Helps you get it out more. I might be wrong. I don't know. But if you are planning to reuse your head studs, because a set of head studs is about 50 bucks. Definitely review your head studs, make sure they're not rotted. A lot of them are going to have rust pits on them. They're almost 100 years old, so it's better to replace them. 50 bucks kind of sucks, but if you're going to reuse them, I would suggest using the two nut method to take them out, because the jaws of this do have a tendency, see if that'll focus on there. You can see there's some marred up areas from the jaws clamping into that stud, and it's actually up into the thread area, so I would have to clean that all out and make sure that's all good. There's really no point in it. I actually have a couple spare sets of head studs that came with some of the stuff I bought, so I don't even have to spend the 50 bucks. I'm just going to put all new head studs in there. So I like using this tool. I think it works better than the two nuts, but the two nuts works just fine, and it doesn't cost anything. I think that tool was between $30 and $40 at O'Reilly's. So the other thing I did was I resurfaced the top of the block. I used a very, very intricate tool to get that done. It's just a chunk of aluminum with some sandpaper on it. Big old chunk of aluminum. I think this is 220 grit paper that I have on here, and basically I just went back and forth nice and slow, and I brought the tool all the way to about halfway over the edge in both directions, so I was sure that I was going flat all the way across, and I wasn't doing it to remove any material. Basically I was just cleaning up the top surface and using this to identify any low spots. If I had low spots, again, that's something I have to decide if I'm going to send the block out to be resurfaced. I have a little bit of a low spot here in the middle, but like I said, this area is not, it's kind of suspended here in the middle in the water jacket. And I know when I clamp down the head and I tighten up this stud, it's going to pull that area up a little bit. So I'm not concerned in here. Everything else looks fairly flat, so we're good to go as far as that goes. I'm going to use the same tool on the bottom of the head before I put that on as well. So it'll work just fine. I don't need to send it out and have it completely resurfaced. The valve seats are bad in this. I saw them before. I said they were pretty crusty. I took a wire wheel and went around, and yeah, they're pretty pitted. I don't have a tool for that. I ordered a vintage abrasive type resurfacer. It was like 35 bucks on eBay. That should be here this weekend. I'm going to try and use that to clean these up. If it works, I can clean them up, relap the valves, we're good to go. If not, I'll have to invest I think it's like $200 for the actual seat cutters, and we'll have to go that route. But everything else looks good, so I'm not going to let these valve seats keep me from getting this motor back together. We'll go ahead and buy the tools we need to get that done. And I'm sure I'll use them again. So $200 investment kind of sucks right now, but at the same time, we'll use it again. So beyond that, we have to take care of the ridge in the cylinders. These cylinders had a very slight ridge on the top. You can catch your fingernail on it a little bit. Realistically, you should take the ridge out before you remove the pistons. When you're taking out your pistons, if they catch on that ridge, you could break the ring, you could break the ring land on the piston, and then you got to buy more parts. But I was lucky, these came out just fine. Like I said, it's not a very deep ridge. Technically, when I'm doing my my honing or my glaze breaking in the cylinder, it might have taken care of the ridge anyways, but I have a ridge reamer, so there's no point in not using it. This is another one of those tools, if you look on the internet, people will tell you, oh no, be careful, you'll destroy your engine, and that might be true. You probably could, but I've used this a few times. Small block Chevy, Model A. I haven't ever come into a situation where things just went crazy and it was about to destroy the block. So I think if you follow the instructions on it and you go slow, it will work just fine and you won't have any problems. It's really not that hard to use. So let's go over the tool itself real quick. So here's what it looks like. These fins out here, there's 3 of them. Basically, that's what holds the tool in the cylinder. You tighten up, let's see if I get my hands out of the way. You tighten up this screw here, that brings the fins out further, and that'll lock that into the cylinder. Once it's in the cylinder, you have 2 adjustments up here. This one here is the rough adjustment to move this assembly out against the side of the cylinder. And then you tighten this down and it'll stay against the side of the cylinder. This adjustment here, and of course this is just for my tool. Make sure you check the instructions for your tool in case it's a little bit different. But this is the cutting tool right here. And this adjustment moves that out further. Let's see if we can see it. So you see it brings that out more. Basically, once you get this into the cylinder and locked against the side, then you make this adjustment that pushes the cutting tool out against the side of the cylinder. And then once you're all set, basically you just start spinning that around, and it's going to go around the inside of the cylinder. It's just going to rub the inside of the cylinder until it gets to that ridge. And when it gets to that ridge, you'll hear the change. I'm sure we'll hear it on the camera, but you'll hear it start cutting into the top of the block here. And the object is it's going to take that ridge out. It's going to basically make the cylinder the same diameter the whole way up. It'll just take out that small little ridge across the top. I'll bring you in closer. I've already done these 3 cylinders, and we're going to do this last one together. So let me get the camera in here closer, and I'll show you how to get this done. All right, folks, we're in here a little bit closer. I hope you can see everything. I'm trying to work around the tripod here. So if you look, this cylinder looks the same all the way up to the top. But if you look at this cylinder, you can see this gray stripe around the top. That is where I've already cut the ridge off of this cylinder, and that's what we're going to do in this cylinder. So when I told you earlier, just make sure that you go slow. That's one of the things you want to look for. If it's not cutting, it's not going to have this gray appearance to it. So as you're going around the cylinder before you get to the ridge, if you're seeing any lines show up that are gray like this, stop. Stop what you're doing, back it back off, and reset it in the cylinder, because clearly something's going wrong. But so we've got our tool set up. Okay, so we've got the tool. It's almost the right size to fit down in here. We want to drop it down so that the blade area is going to be just below the ridge we want to cut. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have it 1/8 of an inch below. We've got quite a bit of travel here on this screw to run the cutting out, the cutting tool out. So just get it below the area where it needs to cut. You can pop this out just to check it. I know you can't see that on camera, but I'm going down, let's see, The ridge is about 1/4 inch, so I'm roughly 1/8 of an inch below that. And then we're going to try and tighten this in. And when I tighten it, I like to kind of wiggle it a little bit just to make sure it's getting into the area where it needs to be. We push the cutting carrier out against the side here and tighten that down nice and tight. And then this adjustment, it has 3 positions, 1, 2, and 3. It's on 2 now. We're going to bring it out to 3, which pushes the tool out against the cutting tool out against the side of the cylinder. So when we put our wrench on here, you can hear a consistent sound as it's basically just riding around the inside of the cylinder. Now I'm going to stop talking, and when the tool starts to actually cut, you're going to hear the change. Now, we're not there yet. It's still not cutting yet, but this is the opportunity where I would say just take a look at the side of your cylinder. Make sure the tool isn't cutting anything, that you're basically just riding on the cylinder right now. And if everything looks good, then keep going. So I think you can hear that. We are now cutting into the ridge. I'm looking over here. I can see, let me bring this all the way around for you guys. So I don't know if the camera can show that, but I can see a gray line starting around the bottom of the ridge. So I know we're cutting into the ridge right now. And basically we're going to just keep going until the tool raises all the way out of the cylinder. And that's it. You can see the tool is up out of the cylinder. I can see that the ridge has been cut all the way to the top of the cylinder. And I'll give you guys a better view here in a minute when I take the tool out. But I can feel the cylinder, and I can feel that that ridge is gone now. So we're pretty good. I'm going to take this off, set this back to 2. So that brings the tool back in. We're also going to loosen the carrier and tighten that back up. So now it's loose in the cylinder, and we're going to release the tool from the cylinder and take it out. Now you guys should be able to see the nice gray line around the inside top of that cylinder, and just by feeling I can tell you I can't catch a fingernail anymore either direction. So now this gray area is the same size as the area below it. There's no more ridge on the top. So that's how to use a ridge reamer. It's pretty simple. Like I said, just go slow and keep checking what you're doing. And that's the easiest way to take out that ridge. Make sure you're not messing up your pistons and preparing this cylinder for its next life. So let me clear some of this stuff out and we'll start getting into the measurements. All right, folks, so we've got the ridge all gone, we've got the cylinders cleaned up, and now it's time to start taking some measurements-ish. The correct way to do it is you're supposed to measure the cylinders. Basically, you take 6 measurements in each cylinder. and then do any of your honing or glaze breaking, whatever you're gonna do, and then you do the measurements again. Well, I'm not gonna do that. That's a waste of time for me. Like I said, I'm not planning to hone the block too much. I'm not going to have it machined, so I can't add material back. I'm not planning to go to the next upsized piston. So basically I'm going to use my gauge to check the taper of the piston, the cylinder, make sure that it's not just crazy out of whack, you know, a huge taper net in that cylinder. As long as that's not the case, then we'll go ahead and do our honing, and then we'll take our final measurements of the cylinder, and that'll tell us where we're at. So what we're going to be using is a dial bore gauge. I got this one on Amazon. I think it was $35. Maybe it was $50. I can't remember. But it was a few years ago, so I'm sure the price has changed. This one will handle 2-inch to 6-inch. And it comes as a whole kit. They all come as a whole kit. I forgot to check the price, but I did check on Amazon. There's a million different suppliers making these kits, so you should be able to find one that's very, very similar. And we need to add some of these little extensions in here based on the size of our cylinder that we want to measure. And this kit, this kit comes with a bunch of different size extensions, some little shims, and even this piece is an additional 2-inch extension. So basically, depending on the size of your cylinder, in particular the Model A, stock size is 3.876 inches. The kit comes with a 3.8 inch extension, which would make it still too small, but then it's got a thick shim that I added in here, so now we're good to go. So that's all installed in here. And basically, when you put this down in the cylinder, and you want to check the size, you can see the dial needle moves as you push on it. So we put it down in the cylinder, and you can see the dial moving around. So if you imagine right now that this is sitting down in the cylinder and it's completely level in the cylinder, this will be measuring the shortest possible point it could measure. If I have this tilted, now this distance becomes bigger. And that's important because if you look at the dial and you watch it, as I tilt it over here to the side, you see this value is higher. And what we want is the needle to go as far as it can this direction before it starts coming back again. And that would be our shortest measurement. That would mean that this tool is straight up in the cylinder. So if we bring it back slowly, you see it stopped, and then we started going back the other way. So we're gonna bring it to right about where it stops, and we're gonna make that our 0 point. Double check. Yep, that's our 0 point. So we're gonna lock this in. That just keeps the ring from moving. And we are about in the middle of the cylinder right now. So if we're at 0, that is the measurement of the middle of the cylinder. We're not going to take this out and get an actual measurement of that. That's not important right now. What we want to do now is we want to push this down to the bottom of the cylinder and do the same thing. Now you can see it's going past the 0 point. We're actually, it's 3 marks, so that is 1.5 thousandths tighter in the bottom of the cylinder than it is in the middle. If we come up to the top, about an inch from the top, let's see, I don't know if the camera's catching that. There we go. And we do the same thing. We can see the top of the cylinder is actually much bigger. So it's, let's say 3. Yeah, I'm gonna say it's a 1.5 thousandths bigger on the top than it is in the middle, which means that the top is 3 thousandths larger than the bottom measurement. So our taper in this cylinder is 3 thousandths. Everything I looked at online, basically they say the taper should be 1.5 to 2 thousandths. Some people said they go as much as 6 and it doesn't cause a problem. For me, I decided I'm gonna go with 4. If it's not over 4, we should be good to go. So this one's at 3, and I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm just gonna go real quickly see if these cylinders are pretty much the same. That one's less than 3 thousandths. Yeah, that one's about 3. Let's start at the bottom on this one. 1. Yeah, so we're all about 3 thousandths of an inch for taper on all of these cylinders. That is within the spec I decided I wanted to use, which was 4. So as far as I'm concerned, the cylinders are not too far out of whack as far as taper. And now I'm gonna go ahead and do all of my honing and everything, and then we'll get into the actual measurements of the cylinders and the pistons. For the honing, I'm gonna do that off camera. You guys have seen people hone a million times. I have 2 different hones. We've got the dingle ball hone, and we've got the 3-stone hone here. The 3-stone, I like starting with this one because it's flat. I can put this down in there, spin it around, kind of roughen up the cylinder, and see if there's any low spots, particularly where the piston drops down to the bottom of the cylinder and then stops and comes back up. That area can have a little bit of wear extra in that area. So if I run this through there, it's a nice flat cut when it goes through, and it can show me any low spots. I usually only like to go a few passes with this one because this one can remove more material than the dingle ball hone. So I like to make a few passes with this, then take it out and do my cross hatching with the dingle ball hone. The problem is this dingle ball hone is too small. So I would need a bigger dingle ball hone to finish that up. So I'm just gonna have to be careful. I'm gonna use the 3-stone hone. We're gonna go back and forth through each of these cylinders, get a good cross hatch in them, make sure there's no unusual low spots, and then I'll bring you guys back and we'll start doing the actual measurements on these cylinders. Okay folks, we're back. I've got all the cylinders glazed, broken, however you want to say it. I honed them out a little bit. They're not perfect, but they're pretty good. They're good enough for the cars we drive. So now we're going to get into the actual measurements. And in order to do that, we're going to need our dial bore gauge again. Don't drop it. And we're also going to need a micrometer. So this is a 3 to 4 inch micrometer. You can get these in various different sizes. 3 to 4 inches is what we need for this. This is what's going to actually tell us our actual measurement. It would be best if I had like a small vise to hold this in when I was trying to make my measurements, but I don't have one available right now, so we'll just try to do it in my lap and hopefully that works. So I'm not going to bore you guys with all of the measurements. We'll do one together, and then I'll do the rest of them myself, because realistically we're supposed to do, let's say we've got the gauge this way, we're supposed to do one measurement in the bottom, one around the middle, one about an inch from the top, and then turn it 90 degrees and do the same 3, bottom, middle, and top. And then so we'll have a total of 6 measurements for each cylinder. That will tell us the size of the cylinder, the actual taper in the cylinder, and if the cylinder is round or maybe it's a little egg-shaped. This data should tell us that. So we're going to do, let's do one at the bottom. And we're going to set it up the same way we did when I showed you checking the taper earlier. So we're going to rotate this back and forth till we get to the lowest point, which looks like right about there. Double check. We're going to lock it down. Double check again. And we're good. So that's it. When this is on 0, that is the measurement in the bottom of this cylinder in this direction. So now we're going to use our micrometer. I am not going to go super in-depth into how to read the micrometer. There's various different kinds you can get. This one's got an analog scale on it. You can get them where they have analog readouts. You can get them with digital readouts. They all come with instructions telling you either how to read the scale or how to set them up. If you really want to go in depth into how to read these scales, I'm sure there's plenty of YouTube videos, but we're not going to go real in depth because that could get confusing. But basically now what we're going to do, it would be better if I had a vise, but we're going to set the gauge in here, and then we're going to tighten our micrometer on the, I hope you guys can see the, let me move this a little bit this way. Okay, so now we're going to adjust the micrometer until this gauge reads 0, which we're at right now. I'm going to lock this in, and then I'm going to do this kind of haphazardly, but we can actually do the same thing that we do in the cylinder, where we rock the gauge back and forth and make sure we're at that lowest point so that we're sure we're reading correctly. So now that I've done that, this space is the same size as the cylinder. Now whatever my gauge here reads is going to be the size of the cylinder there. So if we read this, we know this is 3 inches plus 915. So the size of that location that we just measured is 3.915. If we subtract the standard size of a standard Model A cylinder, which is 3.876, the difference is 0.0396, 7, something like that. It's almost 0.04, which means 40 over. So now we know, at least in that one spot, and most likely the rest of the motor, this cylinder is a 40 over cylinder. So that's good. I'll take all of my measurements. We'll find out if everything is looking like 40 over. I know there's a little bit of a taper in here, so I'm sure it's going to be between 40, 43, I don't know. We'll find out. But the important question is, how did a 60 over piston fit into a 40 over cylinder? That's easy, it didn't. We need to measure those pistons too. So I'm going to go ahead and do all of my measurements, and I'll bring you guys back and we'll measure the, I'll give you the results, and we'll measure the pistons to see what the pistons read out at. Okay, folks, I went through all the measurements. The two outer cylinders, 1 and 4, are 41 thousandths over. The two middle ones are 42 thousandths over. There is a little bit of an egg shape, 2 thousandths of an inch difference. I checked it multiple times, so there is some shape there. The taper on the number 4 is 3 thousandths, which is good. The number 1 is 4 thousandths, which is good. Or acceptable for me anyway. The two center ones are 5 thousandths, and that is a little over what I really wanted. I was hoping to stay 4 and under. At this point, I'm not going to do anything about it. I know it's there. That's going to come into play when we start looking at, we're going to measure the piston, and we're going to see how much of a gap we have between the piston and the cylinder, and a big taper plus a gap between the piston and the cylinder could lead to some noise. It could wear out the ring lands on the piston, or wear out the cylinder, but there's not much we can do unless we want to start boring things over. So we know the two center ones are a little more tapered than the outer ones. At this point, I'm gonna live with it. It's 5 thousandths of a taper in these center two, so kind of sucks, but I think it'll still run okay. I'm not expecting too much problems with that. But let's measure these pistons, or at least one. So we've got a piston here. This is the number 4 piston. Clean it off a little bit. Now, if you look, hopefully the camera will zoom in on that, right around this area here, you can see that is 060. 60 over is what that says. Let's measure and see what we've got. Now, when you measure the piston, you want to measure basically 90 degrees from the wrist pin. So we're going to be measuring in this area, and we want to measure a little bit below the wrist pin. So right around in this area. So we're going to just use our micrometer again. I'm just going to set that there. And we're going to set this right about where we think we are at our highest point. That's not right. Basically, the micrometer should be able to slide over the piston just like that with a little bit of resistance. So that should be our measure. Seems like it's moving. Okay, there we go. So basically, we're measuring across the piston right around in this area. Okay, so that should be pretty close right there. And if we read it, we are 3.91334. So if we imagine we need a piston to cylinder clearance of, I'm going with 3 thousandths. I think the spec is 1.5 to 2. Some people say that's too tight, especially if you're building a touring engine. So they go like 4. But if we add 3 thousandths to our 3.91, let's say 4, that gives us 3.917. that's the size cylinder that this piston should fit in. And as we already know from our other measurements, if you take 3.876, which is standard size, away from the 3.917, that's 40 thousandths. This piston is actually a 40 over piston. So why it's marked as 60 over, I don't know. But it's not. It's a 40 over piston. So that explains how it fits. These rings, I'm going to guess these are a standard size ring because they have just a huge gap when you put them down in the cylinder. But I have ordered already 40 over piston rings. I'm going, because of the taper, I will check the gap at the top of the cylinder and down at the bottom of the cylinder just to make sure that they stay within spec. As long as they do, then everything will be good and we can get this thing buttoned up. So yeah, that's it for the measurements. Really, they're not that difficult. You can see I'm an idiot and I can do it, so I'm sure you can too. You don't even have to be an idiot. You can just be a normal person, but it's really not hard to do. The tools aren't expensive anymore. Back when I was a kid, stuff like this was a little more expensive, harder to get, but now with Amazon and every Chinese company in the world making them, they're easy to get, they're cheap, and it's really not as intimidating as you're thinking in your head. It's you can make mistakes, but like everything, just go slow, double check your work, and you should be fine. So guys, I'm okay with this engine. I think we can just get everything back together as long as I can clean up these valve seats. And once I get that all back together, we can hopefully get this thing up and running. I am not going to take it back over to the A-barn right now. I've got my cherry picker here. I've got a chassis I can put it in to test run it. So I'm going to finish building it here. And it is a week before Christmas, and I don't have all my tools yet, so probably the next video will come out closer to New Year's Day. But hopefully I'll get this all back together and we can actually test fire it in the frame now. So I hope you enjoyed this. Guys, please drop a like, subscribe, leave a comment. If you saw something you thought maybe I made a mistake on, or you want some more information, leave a comment down below and let's get the conversation started, okay? So I will see you guys very soon. Thanks for watching.